but thank you for being here, and we appreciate your attendance. So we'll quickly move into the panel. This is the Green MIP panel. To my right here is David Wilderman with HUD and Technical Support Division. To my left is Molly Kuhn with Partner Engineering, and Stephen Havanko with D3G. The format of the panel will be as follows. David will get up and present on Chapter 6, some of the changes, some of the maybe unknown revisions to the chapter. Molly will talk a little bit about how the Green MIP process is for 221D4s under the new chapter, and Stephen will talk about the same thing, but as it relates to 223Fs and A7s. So without further ado, David, please. There will be time at the end for Q&A, so please submit your questions through the app, and we will address those at the end.
Well, good morning. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? In the very back? Oh, good. So I want to thank Anabar for that wonderful presentation. By comparison with that news, the new Chapter 6 will be a barrel of laughs. So we will take a few moments here to go over the high points of this new chapter. I should say that this is the first opportunity that we have had to write any comprehensive guidance for implementing the MIP notice that was published on March 31st in 2016. So the first thing we'd like to do is give you some numbers on what's happened since, in the 4 years since that MIP notice was published. So this is a look at our production volume, and if I'm able to make this little pointer work, there we go. So this is by section of the Act, production volume. We've had 747 loans closed with Green MIP since the MIP notice was first published. That's 24% of all loans. And new construction substantial rehab leads among the several sections of the Act in terms of the percentage of D4s or 220s or 231s that have been endorsed with Green MIP. With over half of such new construction loans or sub-rehab loans qualifying as Green MIP projects. The percentage of Green MIP loans by SOA is shown here, beginning with the partial year of 2016. These are calendar years. You can see that initially, the 223F program had a significant percentage. That has leveled off. That's the gray portion. Where's our pointer? Oh, well. There it is. So this is your 223F segment. So you can see in the last 2 years, it's pretty much leveled off. The new construction and sub-rehab segment has continued to expand. So that's fairly predictable because it really makes a lot of sense to build it right per a green certification and get the reduced MIP that comes along with it. It's a bit more difficult to retrofit an existing project and have the same ease of construction and implementing or obtaining the MIP. So here are the key points that we reveal in Chapter 6. First of all, the MIP notice is about exceeding the minimum or doing better than the norm. And it's a pretty simple quid pro quo. We all know what quid pro quo means now. It means you do something and you get something in return. So the borrower exceeds the minimum that he would otherwise normally do with respect to building performance, and HUD provides a reduced MIP in return. So you get green MIP for doing better than average or better than normal. The corollary is that if there is no superior performance, then there's no green MIP rate. So HUD relies on green building certifications as the measures of how much improvement there should be and how that performance is measured. And the corollary for that is that if you don't have a certification, then again, there's no green MIP. The other aspect of the policy is that there is a floor, and the floor is an Energy Star score of 75 or better if the number of units present is 20 or more. Most of you know that we have moved to limit or eliminate the Energy Star for green building certification. And when we published or posted the first version of Chapter 6 to the drafting table for comment, many of the comments related to why. Why are you making this go away? So these are the reasons. The first reason is that use of that certification does not, in fact, require or measure improvement. And it actually simply verifies the status quo, and that status quo is frequently less demanding than we had expected when the green MIP notice was published. And as a consequence of this, the Energy Star for existing buildings certification does not anticipate construction. Most of the other certifications that we rely upon are actually like building code overlays, sort of like a zoning code overlay. They are over and above requirements added to an existing base code. The existing building certification has no implications for construction at all. So that's problematic for us. So there's no review of plans or drawings that is executed by the standard keeper. The existing building certification is, for a variety of reasons, also more subject to fraud and abuse. And it also assumes that the 75 score is the only requirement for certification. And these are some elements that we did not appreciate fully in the months April, May, June of 2016, but we have since learned of some of these faults. So we're moving to gradually eliminate this certification for purposes of gaining green MIP. So that existing building certification also, we think, helped create some misimpressions. And one of the key misimpressions is that green MIP rates were obtainable simply by getting the 75 score, and or getting a green building certification, when in fact the case is that both are required. So for those of you who are in the business of originating loans and selling customers, you don't want to sell green MIP as just get a score, because that's not what it is. It's both get a certification and get the score, and the certification will be more demanding than the score. So what are the accepted certifications as proposed in Chapter 6? They're listed here on the, let's see, your left as well is 6.3a of the new chapter, which lists the certifications that you can use for new construction or substantial rehabilitation. And 6.3b lists the certifications that you can use when you can benchmark a property. That is to say, it's an existing building with an occupancy record of 12 or more months. (6.3c) allows us some flexibility with respect to other certifications that are not named or that we haven't recognized. These can be used, but only under certain circumstances. They first of all have to be either a national or a multi-state certification or standard. We're not going to work with individual cities or counties simply because we think that's it's too much. We won't be able to evaluate these kinds of situations. And so if you're going to choose a standard that we haven't recognized, then the architect is going to have to verify that some circumstances are true. He's going to have to verify that certification or that standard keeper reviews drawings and plans and specifications prior to the beginning of any construction. He's going to have to verify that there is on-site construction inspection during the process and that there is a final on-site inspection or commissioning verifying that all the requirements for certification have been completed. And the architect's going to have to document that process, and then he's going to have to certify that this unrecognized standard meets these requirements.
David, can I ask a question about
Sure.
that slide? So your bullet point there about the minimum improved performance, 25% better than HUD minimum design codes or 15% better than benchmark use. I'm inferring from that the 25% is for new construction and the 15% is for existing buildings. Is that true?
That is, that would be the logical result, yes. What this is about is the 25%, and by the way, this was misunderstood by a lot of people who read and commented on the chapter in the drafting table. This particular paragraph applies only to these unrecognized national or multi-state standards. And so we had to establish some sort of metric for those. So what's true is that HUD has a minimum energy code, and that's stated in 6.1a. And those two codes are the International Energy Conservation Code from, 2007 or 9, I'm forgetting which, or the ASHRAE 90.1 standard from one of those 2 years as well. And, well, that's a good while ago. Most states and localities are beyond that now. So this is the only code that HUD can cite because it's the only one that HUD has officially adopted. So the 25% is by reference to that set of codes. So the way this would work is, and the way all new construction sub-rehab works, is you are measuring one design against another. The base design is whatever the minimum code requires, and the other design is something better that's proposed for green certification. And the difference between the performance of the two, in this case, needs to be 25%. In most other cases of all of our recognized standards, it's something else, usually around 15%. In the case of an existing building that you can benchmark, it has an existing record, you're going to measure improvement against that existing record, and the new record that we project, or the new performance that we project after certain improvements are made, needs to be 15% better than that. That, again, is typical of the recognized certifications. So this paragraph is intended to try to make any unrecognized standard that the architect may propose more or less equivalent with the recognized standards. Everybody understand that? Okay. So, yes. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. No. So what we're talking about is the first sub-bullet here. Minimum improved performance must be 25% better than the HUD minimum design codes, which is the International Energy Conservation Code of 2009 and the ASHRAE 90.1 standard from 2007, or 15% better than the benchmarked use. Benchmarked use applies to existing buildings that have an occupancy record. The other applies to new construction or sub-rehab, not yet stabilized, or at least not yet benchmarkable, that is, no 12 months of history. Okay?
David?
All right.
Oh.
Another question?
Yeah. Do you have any sort of idea or breakdown of what certifications projects have used for A7s and Fs? So do you typically see projects that aren't using nationally recognized standards on the HUD list?
I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm hearing you, but I'm not able to distinguish all the words.
Okay, sorry. So for A7s and Fs that have gone green through HUD, are the certifications that have been used, have people been using certifications that aren't on your list? That was what the previous slide corresponded to, right?
Oh.
I mean, what's the
I think
breakdown
the question.
approximately?
I think the question is, what is our experience with unrecognized certifications?
Right, and what do you typically see? What standard has been used for A7s and Fs? Is it almost exclusively Energy Star for existing buildings?
Yes, A7s and Fs are overwhelmingly existing Energy Star for existing building certifications. There have been and beyond that, there have been very few situations where people have wanted to use a certification that was not named. That is not named in the MIP notice. All right, so with respect to the pending elimination of the Energy Star for existing building certification as an eligible criteria for green MIP, we have introduced a certain transition window. So this window will endure for 2 years from the date of the publication of the 2020 MAP Guide. Of course, we don't know when that is yet, but it will be a 2-year window whenever that will date from the publication date of the MAP Guide. And properties that are proposed to use that existing building certification during that window must meet the following requirements. So they have to have a certificate of occupancy issued less than 3 years prior to the application. So these timelines could be a little bit confusing. 2-year window, application must have CO within 3 years of the date of the application. And if they can be benchmarked, then they have to deliver the Energy Star for existing building certification with the application. If they cannot be benchmarked because they don't have 12 months of history yet, then they have to prepare, that is, the energy professional has to prepare an SEDI, a statement of energy design intent, based on the as-built drawings. And in either of these cases, the score has to be 90. And this essentially allows recently built projects that would otherwise not be eligible to use the existing building certification, but we're not going to take the 75 score because we've already seen that that's too weak of a metric. 90 is more realistic. and should easily be achieved by any recently built project.
Can I ask something? So, David, with regard to this, the sort of occupancy less than 3 years, is the thought there that you just want to limit it to properties that have been built to a higher energy efficiency or green code due to the new building requirements over the last several years? Or in other words, why limit it to just projects that were built in the last 3 years?
Sure.
This was really a response on our part to all of you and your issues with the way you had heard what our policy was going to be and your concerns about deals that would come in as assuming that the 3-year rule notice was signed. So this is a way of saying, okay, you've got an existing building, you want to submit it, under, it was built, it was completed 6 months ago, 1 year ago, whatever, and now it can come in as David just described. So it's had a CFO less than 3 years before it comes into us. It either has an existing building certification achieved and delivered, or as his slide says very clearly, if it doesn't have that 12 months at 85% occupancy, that, as I understand it, you need to create your benchmark or your historical standard. You have to submit this SED, et cetera. He will explain all that better than I will. But this was basically a response on our part to concerns from the industry that if we had not done this, we would have been closing out all the deals coming in as a result of the 3-year rule. Okay?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful accommodation. I'm sure there'll be questions as the industry gets into it, but it's a wonderful step, and we appreciate you guys doing that.
Okay, so there have from time to time been a lot of questions about what will happen after endorsement, after we have our green certification and we have our annual performance demonstration, which is a statement of energy performance verified by an energy professional with a score of 75 or better delivered to HUD. First question, who at HUD? Next question, what happens if I don't get to the score? Or similar inability to perform as projected. Well, the answers to those questions are in Mortgagee Letter and Housing Notice 2020-1, first one published this year. And a brief summary of that is that the Mortgagee Letter states where you're supposed to send the SEP, how often and exactly when that should happen. They want all of these to be delivered on the basis of calendar years on the March 31st following the conclusion of the calendar year. And of course, if you're doing this for the first time, then there will be an adjustment of your calendar governing the date when you must first do this, based upon when your receipt of the green certification, where it fell on the calendar, right? So it'll be the following March 31st after 12 months after a full calendar year of energy experience, right? So, and of course that score still remains 75. And if you are unable to meet this requirement, there will be sanctions. Of course, the sanctions will be graduated. They're not going to be drastic right off the bat. They're going to give you an opportunity or give the owner an opportunity to cure. There will be a sequence of responses expected. But basically, sooner or later, you will have to achieve the score. Otherwise, there will, in fact, be more serious consequences, including the possibility of not being able to collect your surplus cash or distribute it. And of course, the lenders who originate such loans will also have consequences. So basically, you don't want to you don't want to underwrite a loan with green MIP that is marginal, because you don't want to be near the margin. Because, well, as we're finding right now about economics, things can be unpredictable. So that's all I have to say, and I'm sure there will be plenty of questions. I think we want to deal with those at the end, right? So now we'll hear from Steve and Molly, about ways that they see to actually apply this guidance to specified circumstances. Thank you. Oh, the rest of Chapter 6 I didn't go into because it's mostly process and procedure. Right?
All right. Can you hear me? There we go. Let me see if I can. All righty. I'm Molly Kuhn. I'm with Partner Energy, and I'm going to talk about the 221D4 green MIP process. So as many of you know, the 221D4 is going to be for new construction. And there are going to be three main program requirements, the first being the Energy Star score of 75 or above, green certification, and then the annual step of 100% the property data where you have to have and maintain a 75 or above. So the Energy Star score of 75 or above, if this is a new construction property, how can you figure what your score is going to be? So we will do energy modeling, and then we will calculate a SETI. The SETI can be calculated as a result of the energy model, and the energy modeling can be done using a variety of softwares. It is important that you use a software. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. It is important that you use a software that models whole property performance and not just a unit by unit performance, because that is how the SETI is calculated on a property-wide basis. Plans and specs are required to calculate the SETI. If they are not finalized, that's actually better, because you might need design changes in order to ensure that your property will score a 75 or above. And as David just mentioned, you really want to aim for higher than a 75. So maybe it's good to shoot for 85 or at least an 80, because once you have actual tenants in there and they're using energy at the property, that score could fluctuate. If your plans and specs aren't finalized, it's good to use conservative estimates. So start with maybe energy code minimum. And then, for instance, if you don't know what SEER or your HVAC would be, let's start with the minimum required by energy code. Then if you're able to exceed that, that's only going to benefit your SETI score. And then your energy consultant can work with you to figure out, what design changes may needed to be made in order to increase your score. As I mentioned, do the SETI before permitting. The design may change. So you do not want to have had your project permitted and then realize it's only projected to get a 65. Green certification. There are a variety of green certifications listed in the Chapter 6 guide, and some of these vary by region. There are many that are nationally recognized, such as LEED and GBS, Enterprise Green Communities, Energy Star, new construction. There's a variety there, low-rise, high-rise. And there are some more regional that they've mentioned in the guide, such as Earthcraft and Earth Advantage. The green consultant can do a feasibility study or a design charrette, and basically that is a process by which we will go through the checklist for certain green certifications and see where you are in terms of getting that green certification as the project is designed. So we're basically checking off yes, no, and maybe. If you're on the path to green certification with all your yeses, that's great. If you're not quite hitting it, then we'll look at your maybes. And then if that doesn't get you there, we'll figure out how we really need to change the design to get you to meet the minimum requirements of the green certification. Do this again before permitting, as your design may need to change. Green building certification options for the 221D4. As I mentioned, a variety of green building certifications are allowed, most common being LEED and GBS. And Green Point Rated is also a national certification that kind of started off in California. There are a few others, like I said, Earth Advantage, Earthcraft, those are more regional. Annual SEP, no sampling, plan for how you are going to obtain 100% whole property utility data and report that annually. So this could be through a design solution, such as master metering and then sub-metering to tenants. This could be using a metering technology that you're, again, designing for. Maybe there's a utility company solution. Look into who your utility providers are and ask yourself, does this utility company aggregate data? Aggregated data means you're getting the whole property data, owner and tenant paid from the utility company. Green lease agreements could be an option. This is still going to be very difficult to get 100% of the data, especially because you have tenants that move out, and once a tenant moves out, how are you going to get that data? So maybe your green lease agreement is a backup plan. This could be language in a tenant's lease, but it probably should not be your first stop. Involve property management in this data collection plan. Energy consultants often get asked to write the data collection plan. However, we aren't the ones collecting the data. So it's really important that you involve the property management and you understand, the borrower understands how you're going, like what your plan is to get this data and report it year after year. And then with that said, I will pass it on to Stephen. Did you have a question, Adam?
I did have a
Sure.
question before you run off. So commercial space, when you're doing the SETI, how is that incorporated into your modeling?
Right.
And I'm asking under the idea that energy usage in the commercial space can vary quite differently if you have a bookstore compared to a restaurant. And how is that accounted for in the upfront modeling?
Yeah. So in Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is where the energy consultant will put a variety of property information. So that Energy Star Portfolio Manager does capture and try to control for those different uses at the property. So, I mean, they will get down to it gets down to the detail of, is there a swimming pool on site? Is the pool heated? Is there a bookstore on site? Is there a restaurant on site? What amount of the gross square footage is the restaurant? Is the office space? So Energy Star Portfolio Manager does try to control for those different variables.
So it's really important to understand what you're going to be filling that commercial space with. Otherwise, you're potentially setting yourself up for failure on the back end.
Yes, certainly. And on that note too, you want to make sure you have a plan to get data for those commercial spaces too, because they're still part of your property and will be needed for the annual SEP.
Yeah, and Adam, I would add that a lot of times you don't know exactly who that retail client is going to be. There are certain types within Energy Star Portfolio Manager that you can exclude, though. So if it's a restaurant, that energy use profile can be very different, and there's some very detailed rules within Energy Star Portfolio Manager where you exclude that gross square footage and you exclude that energy use, and that's the best way to benchmark the property for multifamily. But the other thing is, when you do have the retail client picked out, make sure you push them to implement green improvements as they do the build out, right? Should be all LED lighting, Energy Star appliances, things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the main message being here that the addition of commercial spaces in Energy Star Portfolio Manager is very complex, and it is very tricky.
As far as having your data collection plan, a couple years ago when we were talking about this, when the Green MIP first came out, there was some concern about how you monitor or how data loggers used for gas or that sort of thing. I mean, electricity I think is pretty straightforward, but what about gas? Has there been any, like if the utility company is not providing that aggregate data, what can you do?
Master meter for gas, if you can. That's the best solution, master meter for gas. If you can't, there are some companies out there that can do data logging to get the gas data. But from my understanding, it's really tricky because you end up kind of tampering with the gas company's lines, and they may not allow or like that. So really try to design the property in a way that the property can be master metered for gas. It's much, much trickier to install data loggers for gas than electricity. Yeah, my pleasure.
Good morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the changes for the F and for the A7 program. And what I wanted to do is just summarize what those requirements will be under the new proposed guidelines. Of course, when I drafted these SLAs, I didn't have sort of the breaking news about the 2-year grandfather for Energy Star. But we will talk about what those requirements are and how to approach them under different situations when you have existing buildings that have green certifications for ones that don't. And then I'll summarize some of the process changes that I think are important to this program. So the first thing to reinforce, and I reinforce this every time I'm on a call with a borrower, is there are 3 primary criteria to the green MIP, and that hasn't changed. You need to show energy efficient performance, whether through a SEP or through a SETI, and you have to earn a green building certification. And then the big one, don't let anybody forget this, you have to commit to benchmark every year afterwards and maintain that score of 75. So those 3 components haven't changed. But what will change with the new guidance is the path that you take through this. And so this next slide is really meant to be a flow chart to explain how to approach an existing building. First step has been, always will be, start with getting a benchmark of the building and how it's performing. Now, if you have a score above 75 on Energy Star Portfolio Manager, you move to the right. And the question is now, do you have a green building certification already for that property? The reality is there aren't a lot of multifamily that just on their own went out and got green certified. There are some that did, with things like Energy Star certified homes or NGBS or LEED. If you do have that, then great, you're in a perfect situation. Whether it was the old guidance or the new guidance, you can keep moving forward. However, like I said, a lot of properties don't have that green certification. So the path that they would take, and as David has talked about, is if they can get 100% of the energy data over 12 months, all energy used on site, every meter for a full 12 months, then you can get the Energy Star existing building certification. And that's the path that's going to change, right? We're not going to have that, and a lot has been going through that. Now, one thing I should note, and I think this gets confused in our industry a lot, is Energy Star labels are on everything, right? And so people hear Energy Star and they think, oh, Energy Star is going away. It's not an option. Well, not completely. There's Energy Star for new construction, which is the multifamily program, certified homes, multifamily high-rise. Those are all still part of the standard and still accepted. They're robust programs. What is changing is the existing building certification, which, as David has described, is really just a verification that the energy used is what you said it was when you did the benchmark, and that basically that the owners aren't playing any games with energy use, trying to bump that score up. That's part of the verification process. So if you don't have a score above 75, what do you do next? Well, in the existing guidance, what we do is the ASHRAE Level 2 energy audit, which I would call an advanced energy study. And what we're going to do as energy professionals is look very closely at that property, the energy use that we have. We're going to build energy models to figure out what type of energy efficiency measures do you need to install to get that score above a 75. Now, in the old guidance, if you had a score of, let's say, a 72 or a 70, you're pretty close, and you may not have to do a whole heck of a lot to get there. In that case, if the repairs were going to be less than the $1,500 per unit, what you could do is commit to do those repairs, make sure you're going to get 100% data, and then get Energy Star existing building as your green certification. That path won't be available in the new guidance. So what are you left with? Well, in that case, you're left with some of the other green building programs that are designed around remodels, and we'll talk more about what those programs are and how they work in a couple of slides. And so what I did is, and this is going to seem a bit repetitive as I go through some of this, but I wanted to summarize the new guidance for the A7 and then go through the new guidance for the Fs and then kind of come back to it and think about it from the lens of, I've got this property, what do I need to do? I've got this type of property, what do I need to do? So for the A7, keep in mind the green MIP is only going to be applicable if one of two things. One, your existing mortgage already had the green MIP rate, or you've got a property that had a previous green building certification, like an NGBS or a LEED certification that they've gotten within the last 15 years. Now, part of the reason I think for that 15 years, and David can jump in, is green building programs, just like building codes, they ratchet up, right? And so if you were to go back to one of the first Energy Star certified homes, that's nowhere near as robust as it is today. And so that's the check that's in there. The other thing is the application is going to need to have an Energy Star existing building certification that's based on energy data from a time period that's at least within 6 months of your application. Key is we want recent data, and we want to make sure that, frankly, that the owners understand how to get 100% data, because they're going to need to do that ongoing with the loan. There will be some situations where you're probably not able to get the 100%, 12 months of energy data. And in that case, there is a sort of a one-time window where you can do a sampled SEP using the guidance that's been out there before. However, you are going to need to install energy monitoring system like the one that Molly described, and you're going to need to get that Energy Star building certification. On the new guidance for the F, there's two sort of scenarios you could think about that you have. Number one is you've got an existing building that already had a green building certification, which is fantastic if you've already got that, because frankly at that point the owner's already made the investment and made some good decisions during construction. Or you're dealing with a property that's going to commit to earn a new green building certification that's appropriate to a remodel. And so on the left side of this slide is, you've got that existing green certification. Maybe the owners decided to get Energy Star certified homes for all of the units in the development. So you've checked that box. The other things you're going to need to make sure is, number one, that any recently built projects, they had Energy Star appliances installed. And part of the rationale there is we want to make sure that even properties that come into the program, the Green MIP program, they're not short-circuiting, if you will, the D4 requirements that are out there. And it's in the D4 requirements that you have Energy Star certified appliances. So, accurate, David? And again, if you don't have 12 months of energy data available, what you could do is do a SETI on the as-built design to show what that score would be, and it would have to be obviously above a 75, and of course deliver a data plan that shows how you're going to get 100% data. If you're going down the path of having to earn a new green building certification, what you're going to want to do, same thing, you're going to want to have that SEP energy benchmark that we've talked about, and you're going to need to do the ASHRAE Level 2 energy audit to figure out what scope of improvements you need to do. That's an important step, and it actually factors into a lot of the green building programs that are relevant to remodels as well. There was, I will note some clarification there, that there's a distinction between the types of energy audits, whether it's level 1, level 2, level 3. If you've got a general contractor already retained to estimate costs, then a level 2 is appropriate. If you don't, then you need to have the level 3, which is really making sure that you've got your cost estimates accurate. You're also going to need that SETI report that we've talked about to demonstrate a score above a 75, and you're going to need to earn the green building certification within 15 months. And then, of course, the data plan, prepared by a qualified energy professional. So what I thought I'd do is now take a step back, and you think about sort of, if you've got a property that's got that existing green building certification, they've actually got a pretty clear path to the green MIP, honestly, because the owners made some good investments when they built that property. Those green certifications, and it's interesting to note because we talk a lot about green certifications, and we talk about did they design it, did they follow the scorecard. It's much more than just checking boxes on a scorecard. A big part of green building programs is what happens during construction. You can design the best thing in the world, but if you don't build it the right way, it's not performing well. And having been out on many job sites and seen the things that will occasionally slip through construction, if not for a green building program stepping in and saying that's not going to cut it, the buildings won't perform the way they should. So my point being is, if that property has a green building certification on it, you should feel good. Now, of course, the SEP is going to show that it's actually performing well as well. But those are great properties to get into the program. So you're going to need that Energy Star certified appliances for anything that's been recently built. And you're going to need to follow the A7 guidance that I just went through. Now, one thing I would call out, and I've had this conversation with several developers recently, is if you have an intent to finance your property with HUD and pursue this green MIP, during construction, get your green certification. So, and I'd encourage all of you, as you talk to your clients that have projects out there, remind them that they need to do this. A lot of developers don't want to do it. They don't want to spend the money initially up front, but spend the money now, leave yourself the option to get the green MIP in the future. The other question I get very frequently is, when is too late? I've already started construction. Is it too late to get my green certification? You know, as Molly said, the best time to engage a green consultant like us, like myself, is during the design, because then I can help you make the best choices that are going to be the most cost effective for your property. But even if you've made it up to the permit stage, or frankly, if you've broken ground, there's still a chance that I can get you into a green building program. However, once you install drywall over that insulation and seal up the wall, I have no idea how good a quality that install was, and any reputable green building new construction program will not certify that property. And you might say, well, that seems kind of severe, but what I would say is go out on a job site and take a look at how insulation is installed and where it gets missed, and that is exactly why we need verification all the way through that process. And it's why, you know, David stressed that in the new guidance, that on-site verification is critical during the construction process. So back to the other side of this equation, which is, you know, I've got maybe an existing building. It's, let's say, 15, 20 years old. The score is less than a 75. I think these are great properties to try to get into the green MIP program. What we can do is you engage the energy professional. We can do that advanced energy study. We can work closely with the owner and their team to identify the most cost-effective ways to get them to get a score comfortably above a 75. Now, when I'm working with an existing property, I'm never aiming right at the 75 because I'm conservative, like a lot of you are, and you know, we want to make sure that we're in that 78 to 80 range. Is target. It's really what we're trying to get. As part of that process, we're going to generate a full SETI that's going to show that score. And I'll remind, and I've been saying this for the last 3 years, if someone is telling you that you're going to get, you know, 5 or more points of lift off of your Energy Star score just through operational changes, be skeptical of that. Because A, making sure that those operational changes take place in reality is hard to do. People will say they do things and then it doesn't happen. And 2, there's a risk that those things get overstated in modeling. So if you're going down this path with a borrower, I would encourage you to set expectations that route is going to take some investment. It's not free money, but I would say it's a phenomenal return on investment for them, because you're really thinking about, it's not just that I have to replace that equipment. I was probably going to have to replace some of that equipment anyway because it was near the end of useful life. It's really the incremental cost to get it to a more energy efficient option. Regarding the green building certifications that are available, so David went through this and Molly touched on it. You've got, in the remodel space, you've got Enterprise Green Communities, which is a national program, really kind of plays more to the affordable side. You've got Earthcraft and Greenpoint, which are more the regional options. And then you've got NGBS Remodel, which is a national program and works really well, frankly, on existing buildings. We've done quite a few of those. The key to get, just as a for instance, a property through the National Green Building Standard NGBS Remodel Program is we need 3 things. We need a 15% improvement in energy performance, which if you're already doing that ASHRAE Level 2 energy study, we've already kind of shown you the path you need to do to improve that. You also need a 20% improvement in your water efficiency. A lot of times, you know, that's, you know, if it's for an older property, that's relatively easy to do with aerators, maybe replacing toilets, more energy efficient washing machines can really kind of improve the water efficiency of a property. And then the final thing is you need to be able to score at least 88 of these green practice points from other chapters related to sort of where the property is located, site considerations, to building durability, to things like indoor air quality, and then operations and maintenance practices. So, what I want to kind of hit on this point is you've got existing buildings out there. NGBS remodel, there are some really good paths to help improve those buildings and how they perform and make sure that they perform going forward. All right, my last slide. So what I wanted to do is just summarize some of the other key changes and clarifications that were in there in the new guidance. We talked a little bit already about the requiring ENERGY STAR certified appliances. Again, just like when you talk to your developer about you should be making sure you have a green certification, remind them that they should be getting ENERGY STAR certified appliances as part of that program. The new guide has clarified that qualified energy professionals should be used for the SEP benchmark and for data plans. And that's important, and arguably I'm standing here as a qualified energy professional saying this, but I can't tell you the number of energy benchmarks I've seen floating around that will say a property is scoring 100. And I look at it and I go, come on, it's not scoring 100. Something's missed. So it's critical that you engage somebody that's going to look closely to make sure they have all the data and that it's been properly entered in ENERGY STAR Portfolio Manager. A lot of room for errors in interpretation that can be incorrect. As David has mentioned, there's going to be no sampling for SEPs going forward. It's got to be either 100% aggregated data from utilities, or we're going to have to install those remote meters and data loggers. The one good news I will say is, even frankly, in the last 3 years, I've already seen quite a few utilities start to embrace giving us this whole building aggregated data. And I've had many a conversation with the utility describing why it's in their best interest to do that and why there's no customer privacy related issues when they do it that way. I expect we'll see more and more utilities starting to step up and help us with regards to that. There was also clarification in there that the SEP should be based on data within 6 months of the application. That really wasn't called out in the original guidance, so it's good that we have that clarity now. And we also have a clear definition that, if in the future the ENERGY STAR algorithm and how it scores properties changes, that we will look back to what the energy use intensity was at the time of application. So that can allay some of the concerns out there. So I think that's it. Questions?
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, we can open up to questions.
Regarding the ENERGY STAR appliances, if you don't have all of your appliances as ENERGY STAR, could that be part of the non-critical repairs? And would you be able to score it, I guess, without that, or can you hear?
So the question is if all your appliances aren't ENERGY STAR appliances, can whatever portion of those that are not ENERGY STAR be non-critical repairs and allow you to achieve the green building standard?
The requirement that all appliances be ENERGY STAR applies to new construction and substantial rehabilitation, right? Not to existing buildings or those that can be benchmarked. What does apply to existing buildings is that the capital needs assessment must specify, and the owner must actually implement as he replaces appliances and similar equipment, high performance and or ENERGY STAR rated gear. Right? So there's no immediate requirement for an existing building that can be benchmarked to replace all appliances, apart from what would normally be the case just based on the CNA.
Okay. My second question is, it seems to be that you're saying that if you have an existing energy qualified certification, that you're going to have to do another one for existing building. Is that correct? Within 6 months? So you're going to have 2 certifications?
There is a situation where you have green MIP. This is like an A7. You have green MIP. You don't have a previously issued or recognized certification that's on our list of the recognized certifications, right? So basically, you got an Energy Star for existing building certification in April, May, June, July, or something of 2016 or 17. Now you're coming in with record low rates. You want to refinance. You want to keep your green MIP. So we're saying, okay, we'll consider that, provided that you do it over again. You get the new Energy Star. You get a new Energy Star for existing building certification. Well, why would we do that? The primary reason is A, we want to prove it. B, many of those properties may have earned this green MIP at a point in time when we basically didn't have anything called a data collection plan. We may have said, oh, you can sample. Well, we're not going to sample anymore for purposes of continuing performance. So the requirement that you redo the Energy Star for existing building certification acts as a trigger to prove that you can get 100% data. And if you can't, then you have a one-time opportunity to correct that by installing monitoring devices or whatever as a repair, and then within 15 months, you have to deliver the actual certification. And so why are we so concerned about sampling in ongoing performance? Here's why. This annual requirement is going to be something that asset management has to accept, verify, and monitor. We're trying to keep that as simple as possible because asset management already has plenty to do. And what we know is that if we impose on them the requirement to verify that the sample performed was sufficient, accurate, correctly done, and all that, well, it isn't going to happen. And what we also know is that if we write a requirement that is never enforced, well, it's an invitation to ignore the requirement and corrupting, right? I mean, pretty soon everybody's not bothering to do the sample correctly, and maybe it's not a sample at all. Well, so we can't really let that happen. So what we have to do is make this ongoing performance requirement as simple as possible for the purposes of monitoring and enforcement. And that means we don't want any sampling. We just want to be able to look at that score and the energy use intensity score, if it's appropriate, and say pass or fail. Right?
David, clarification question. If we have a property that was constructed in 2010 and has a SEP score of 85 and receives Energy Star certification, will that property not be eligible for green MIP because of the age of the property?
Well, do you assume by Energy Star certification that they're meaning the Energy Star for existing building certification? That sounds like it.
Yes. Yes.
And so they got this in what year?
2010 is the question. Built in 2010. Mm-hmm.
And so the proposition now is that they want to refinance. So they have they already have a green MIP mortgage.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, so the answer to that would be no, if I understand the question correctly, because this phase-in that we're talking about basically applies to properties that would be eligible under the mortgagee letter 2020-3, which eliminates the 3-year rule. It's not intended to reach back to 2012 or 2010 or 2008, right? Properties that are not already certified, built then, have to essentially conform, they have to get a new certification, one of the several listed for existing properties, most likely the NGBS, and they would have to improve by the minimum 15% that NGBS specifies, or use one of the other possible certifications.
Got an audience question over here.
Hi. I had a quick question. When you guys are talking about having a green certification, you didn't mention in here that it has to be a current green certification. Is that a requirement of the program? And what I'm thinking about here as an example is that LEED periodically requires you to go through and recertify like every 5 years, I think is what it is. And so does it have to be a current green certification, or could it be, you know, maybe I earned it 10 years ago, it's lapsed, and so it's no longer current?
Do you have an answer to that?
I think I can take that one. So the way the guidance is written is that green certification at new construction has to be earned within the last 15 years. So if you had a property that was LEED certified under new construction 10 years ago, then it would meet the requirement.
Yeah, you're good to go.
If USGBC, which is the program that oversees LEED, wants you to do their sort of their existing building operations program every 5 years, that's something they're trying to push. That's not baked into this requirement, and so it's not. Once a property has earned a new construction certification, they always have it. It's theirs. Does that answer your question?
Other people ask questions. I got a variety of ones, but I don't want to hog all the time.
Will there be an implementation period for Chapter 6? Without a definitive issuance date for the new map guide, projects may be eligible for green MIP today, Energy Star existing buildings, and ineligible at issuance.
There will be a phase-in period. We don't know exactly how long for, following the publication of the map guide. So the number of days or months is to be determined.
Okay, because yesterday I think Tom or someone had mentioned that when the new map guide's issued, then it will immediately go into effect, and there are portions of the map guide which there will be some sort of grace period. Will this be one of those grace periods?
We recognize that there will be people working on active applications where money has already been expended for certain energy-related activities, and it would be difficult or it would be penalizing to find out, when you don't know when the map guide is going to be published, that, we guessed wrong. So there will be a period of time, it won't be a very long time, where it'll be long enough for people to complete their work for an application that hadn't quite made it to our door.
Sorry to interrupt because I have to leave, but I just wanted to note that on David's slide 9, when I talked about the concession we made for the 3-year rule buildings, that is good for only 2 years from publication of the map guide. I know it's on the slide, I know David said that, but I didn't stress it. So 2 years after publication for the map guide, we assume that any building at that point has had time to get the green certification, starting with design, as Stephen recommended, and we will not be accepting the Energy Star for existing buildings after that time.
But for those at the moment, and continuing until the publication of the map guide, Energy Star for existing building certifications will continue to be accepted, and that continuity will go beyond the publication date of the map guide by a short period of time in order for any applications in the pipeline at that point to be completed, right?
Right, and what we heard yesterday was the draft or the new map guide would be published sometime in September is the new target. So presumably there will be a grace period after that, just so everybody's thinking timeline.
I would say that if I were an originator or a lender, I would not be out next month trying to sell new clients on let's get this done by X date so that we can qualify with an existing building certification, for green MIP. If you've already got customers, they're already doing this work and so forth, and you're going to get that application filed and you miss it by a week or something because the map guide gets published on August 1st or something, then you'll have another 60 days or something to get it done. But that's it. I think that answers the question, right?
I got two questions for the group. The first one is for A7s that need to install meters in order to get the data. Is the cost of installing the meters count against the $1,500 a unit threshold for the A7 on repairs?
If you have to install meters. So if you have to install energy meters as part of the A7 to be able to get 100% data, he's saying is that within the cost threshold per unit?
We don't know. Most of the time we think it will be, but
Does it get counted?
it depends. But if you're asking, will we, in some automatic way, waive the $1,500 item for that purpose, I don't have an immediate answer for that. We would probably be reluctant to do it, but might consider it.
The second question is for properties that are now 4, 5, 6 years old that don't qualify for Energy Star certifications. For the panel, what kind of repairs can you guys are going to be required, recommended in order to achieve the 15% improvement that's going to be required in order to get approved for green MIP? You guys have any initial thoughts? Stephen, this is more so to Stephen and Molly.
Yeah, this creates a bit of a challenge. So if I've got a building that's only 5 years old, right, a lot of that equipment still has many years of useful life on it, so you don't want to be replacing that equipment. And so trying to get a 15% improvement in energy efficiency and let's say a 20% improvement in water is going to be hard to do. So, but the reality is, any of the green building certifications out there for remodel require an improvement. So, I mean, there are some options. The other question I'll sometimes get is, what if I put a lot of solar panels up on, my building? In some markets, that can make a lot of sense. It can, and it will help improve the score, but sometimes not as much as you might think, based on how the Energy Star algorithm works and how it accounts for solar. So,
remember, the basic intent of this whole initiative is to incentivize improved construction methods and procedures or, improved performance. If you don't have improved performance to offer, then you don't have the quid that gets the quo. So had this 2010 or 2008 or 2012 building pursued a metric at the time that was demonstrably better than the minimum code or, average, well, what would that have been? Well, it might have been a LEED certificate or NGBS or one of the recognized certificates that we already have talked about. And if that's true, you're in. But if you didn't do anything like that, you simply met the minimum code, and that happens to get you a nice score, that doesn't by itself qualify.
I had a question in regards to the continuing performance. Let's say you had a score that falls below that 75 ongoing continuing performance measurement. What are the acceptable remedies for that? Is it, I mean, right now I know that the traditional guidance is do an ASHRAE level 2 energy audit, select measures that will bring you back up above a score of 75. Typically everybody's kind of aiming towards an 80, and then implement those, and then you have to then, 15 months later show that you've gotten that score or have improved above a 75. Do you know what the remedies will be?
I still. Are we talking about remedies that are prospective, or are we talking about remedies after you fail to get on continuing performance? I'm sorry, these microphones are difficult for me. I'm not hearing a lot of it.
Yeah, I apologize. Hopefully this will be a little bit better. I'll try to talk louder into it. The question I had was, you've gotten your green MIP, and let's say 2 years from now, or let's say 3 years from now, after the green the guide is out, and you go to do your benchmarking as part of the ongoing performance, and you find that your property scores, let's say, a 70. What is considered to be an acceptable remedy? Is it like right now where it's an ASHRAE level 2, you identify the measures, and then you can implement those and then show that those measures improved your score?
Well, let's assume everyone's acting, cooperatively and in good faith and so forth. Owner gets this news. Owner goes, "Oh my goodness, what am I going to do?" Well, he's going to go back to his energy professional. He's going to talk to them about that problem. A logical thing to do would be to start looking for ways to improve, so that when we go talk to HUD and say, well, I didn't make it, but here's what we're going to do about it, I have a good plan. What would be the good plan? Well, we update our ASHRAE Level 2 energy audit, we identify a number of things that we can improve, and we get them costed, and we propose to do it. HUD will probably say, attaboy. And then next year you'll get another Energy Star for existing buildings, or you'll get another SEP, or Statement of Energy Performance, and voila, we'll pass. Everybody will be happy. Yes, sir, Mr. Dan. You chose the tenants. Maybe you should implement one of the recommendations in the chapter, which is you should make current energy data, real-time data, available to tenants, because the studies show that when tenants know what's happening, they actually, and they're paying the bill, that they actually modify their behavior, sometimes resulting in savings of 10%. Well, the savings of 10% will definitely get you your 75 score. And that may be all that's required. But basically, this whole matter of tenant behavior is sort of a, I don't consider it a real issue, because as the score was developed based upon the sample of 300 and some odd properties, all those properties had tenants, and not all of them were good tenants. They're probably just like your tenants. And if your tenants, Mr. Owner, are uniquely bad, I'm not sure I would broadcast that fact.
Sorry, I know I keep peppering you guys with questions. One of the other questions that we had is in regards to the requirement of an ASHRAE level 2 versus an ASHRAE level 3. When you're going through the 223F, you don't have a certification program. The level of effort required between a level 2 and a level 3 is substantially different. And if what you're really looking for is that bid level costing, why are you making it so you have to do all this extra work that you're not really looking for, when you would find it acceptable for a level 2 if you had a GC, versus if you don't have a GC, if all you're really looking for is that bid level service? Why don't you just say that an ASHRAE level 2 is acceptable as long as you get bid level pricing? Does that question make sense?
I think so, but that's precisely the reason we would do it, because we want bid level pricing, And if you don't have any way to present bid level pricing, then we think you should provide the ASHRAE Level 3 energy audit. By the way, we don't think this is going to happen very often. A number of comments, including I think some of yours, Phil, discussed the requirement for a project architect that is now present. If you're going to do green MIP, we're looking for a project architect. And so some people said, well, gee, why is that? I mean, we don't need a project architect most of the time, especially if the repairs and alterations are not very significant. And of course, that assumes that repairs and alterations will not be significant. And that also is based on the experience with Energy Star for existing buildings, where you could get green MIP just by changing some light bulbs. Well, you can't just change light bulbs anymore. That's a factual outcome of the change on the existing building certification. In fact, if you just pick the most likely remodeling certification that you would use in this new era of Chapter 6, it'll be NGBS, and you'll have to improve over your benchmark by 15%, which means you're going to spend some money, you're going to do a fair number of repairs and alterations, and, well, we think you should have a project architect. And quite possibly a general contractor. And if you have a general contractor, then the ASHRAE Level 2 energy audit will be sufficient, because we'll have a bid price.
David, because Energy Star was included on a blanket basis in the I'm right here. I'm asking questions from people. Because Energy Star was included on a blanket basis in the 2016 Federal Register Notice, will the same formal Federal Register Notice and comment process be followed to limit that Energy Star for new construction only?
No, the MAP guide is going through clearance, and we think that's sufficient.
So you don't think a new Federal Register Notice needs to come out to change? Okay.
This is, the MIP notice was non-specific as to Energy Star. It was non-specific as to certain others as well. So we consider it within the reasonable realm of rulemaking or guidance writing that the MAP guide, being a product subject to departmental clearance, as well as Paperwork Reduction Act approval, is adequately advertised, adequately commented on by the public, and within our authority to implement.
If Energy Star for existing buildings is the core for F and A7 transactions, and green MIP is currently used on 24% of loans, do you anticipate a significant decrease in business with the exclusion?
Sure. I wasn't sure I got the whole question in any case.
No, because A7 is really not a significant part of our business, and even if it were, I think David has made a very good case as to why we have to clarify that part of the reg and just stop, accepting Energy Star for existing buildings the way it is now, which really can be earned by changing the light bulbs. That's his favorite statement. Change the light bulbs and you can get Energy Star for existing buildings. So we're not worried about losing business over this, believe me.
And for anyone who doesn't realize, Susan is reading the questions that are coming in from the app have been upvoted. So it's not that she has a ton of questions.
Like Charlie yesterday.
David, a clarification question. I think I already know the answer, but I think it's helpful for everybody to hear. but what about a project that was built in the past 3 years with 12+ months of occupancy data above 85%, but where 100% of the utility data is not available? Is there a path to qualify for these deals based on that 2-year grace period that you're discussing?
Well, it sounds like so the 2-year period, well, first of all, right now, until the map guide's published, it's not a problem. If you've got 12 months if you can benchmark now, and you can file an application prior to publication of the map guide, you've got no problem. There's no change. If, I mean, there is this, the notice does have a requirement for an ASHRAE Level 2 energy audit. That does seem nonsensical with respect to, a newly built project, but it's the way the rule's written. So that might be an issue. But in any event, after the map guide's published, again, this will trigger a 2-year window where each application must have a CO issued within 3 years prior to the date of the application. So it will be a moving window, in a sense, right, as time passes. The basic idea is that, and this is what all the lenders should bake into their information for customers, is if you're contemplating a development project, and maybe you're just having an initial conversation with a lender or several lenders, tell them now. If you're interested in getting green MIP, do it now. Start it now. Select, here's Chapter 6. Select one of these certifications. Do your design this way. You will have no problems. If you are indefinite and don't do any of these things, then when you come later for an F takeout, it will not be available.
So, David, here's a clarification question. Confirming understanding, current 223F loan done before green MIP has to get a green certification before coming in for 223A7 to qualify for green MIP, is that correct?
Yes, you have to get a new Energy Star for existing building certification. And I believe during my remarks I explained that as a method of adjusting for data collection plans that included sampling as a way to generate the data, which is something that we're eliminating. And the method for triggering that is to use that existing building certification because it requires 100%. If you can't get it, the most likely reason will be because you can't get 100%, and then you will have the option of remedying that. But if you choose not to exercise that option, then the only change is that you wouldn't get green MIP for the mortgage that you're applying for.
I think we have time for one more question if there's any.
Okay. For the new 2-year grace period for Energy Star for existing buildings for projects built less than 3 years ago, a SETI or SEP that scores 90 is now required. Is annual benchmarking greater than 90 as opposed to 75 then required for the life of the loan?
No.
There it is. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your attention. Thank you, panelists, for all your hard work and help on this. We appreciate it. Now I think it's time for lunch, right?